Hello and welcome to another episode of the CyberSec Migrant. My name is Femi. I'm your host. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We hope you enjoy the content we put out here. We put out cybersecurity content related to the industry at the moment and also stuff that new immigrants to Canada can find useful as they start to build up a career in cybersecurity in here. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you and welcome. Thank you for watching another one of our videos. If you listen to this on Spotify or any of our podcast platforms, we suggest you follow the show so you don't miss any new episodes when we release them. And if you're here on YouTube, consider subscribing to the channel and ringing the notification bell so you can get updated when we have new episodes. Today, I have a guest on the channel, and we're going to be having a very interesting conversation. My guest today is Anthony Green, who is a highly motivated and accomplished security professional. He's got a proven track record of success in managing security operations and compliance. He's the manager of security operations and compliance at CPABC, which is the umbrella body for professional accountants in British Columbia, and he leads a team responsible for developing and implementing a comprehensive security program. He also has expertise in vendor management and also has a talent for balancing the needs of security, security of staff, and security of vendors to achieve optimal outcomes. And that thing that you may not know about Anthony that I do know is he loves giving back through teaching and leading academic programs. So he is the program lead for cybersecurity programs at University of British Columbia, which is one of the most prestigious universities in all of Canada, I would dare say. And he's currently building a comprehensive professional certification in cybersecurity program management. And he has a passion for sharing his knowledge and his expertise, which is demonstrated by his role as an instructor of the cybersecurity strategy and risk management micro credential at UBC. So if you've been thinking of getting a micro credential to improve your academic outcomes, Anthony's your man. And finally, in addition to those pursuits, he's also committed to giving back to the community, volunteering his time. And he recently finished a tenure as the immediate past president of ISACA Vancouver's chapter. And he also previously held the role of vice president and communications director. So he's everywhere, academia, community, and he's very active in the mentorship community as well, actively mentoring students, young graduates looking to help them land their first opportunity. So who better to talk about the cybersecurity industry than somebody who is in the academia, in the community, and knows everything about that. So welcome, Anthony. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. That was an amazing introduction. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. I was having a conversation recently with someone, and you were like, "Oh, we're trying to hire staff, but we can't find any staff to hire." And that seems a contrast to, you see all these ads and all these news articles that say there's a deficit of 3.5 million or whatever the number is, jobs in cybersecurity between now and 2030. So it sometimes seems like how do you correlate those two different thoughts? So to ask someone who's in the field, someone who's an expert, what's your perspective on the current state of the cybersecurity landscape, particularly for Canada, and how is it evolving?
So those are some great. That's a great starting question. And from my experience, what I've noticed is we have there's two sides of the stick, right? There's a whole bunch of entry level people that, if you look at any entry level cybersecurity position on LinkedIn or something, you'll see 200, 300 applicants. Now, if you go and then if you still talk to all these companies, say there's no one out there, right? There's not enough people out there. And what I think is the issue is that we, over the past year or two, we've been touting not enough jobs, and people have started to go into cybersecurity. But there still isn't that many people that are senior in the industry. A lot of the more senior people in the industry have, especially during COVID, have either retired. A lot of them have started their own businesses. They work for themselves now. They're consultants. And that, because the industry was so small to begin with, that leaves a gap of intermediate to senior level industry professionals. So when those organizations are saying that they can't find enough people, what they're really saying is they can't find enough mid to senior type people. There's many junior people. Now, the issue is also the fact that everyone's looking for a unicorn, right? Everyone's looking for somebody with 2 to 4 years of managing this, managing that, blah, blah, blah. What people don't realize is sometimes having maybe like a sysadmin that's been a sysadmin for 5-7 years and is only just getting into cybersecurity is actually more valuable than somebody that's been in cybersecurity for a year or two, because these sysadmins may be easier to train, and should understand these policies because they understand the foundations, right? So it's kind of an issue of also these organizations that want these unicorns. They're not willing to uh, train people up a lot of time, and sometimes it's not because they're not willing to; it's because they don't know how. Which is where these education programs come in, where a lot of education we see is not necessarily just students trying to get into cybersecurity, but it's professionals trying to move into cybersecurity as well. And I think that's really the way we fill the gap, is by finding parallel industries that work well with cybersecurity, whether it be auditors like CPAs, right? Whether that can become CISAs, whether it's sysadmins that become security architects, right? That's really where we need to look to find this mid to senior talent. And for junior talent, it's simply, now that it's same thing that happened with software engineering. People kept saying not enough software engineers, they make lots of money. So a lot of juniors come in, and a lot of them expect to have jobs because there's such a gap. But really, the ones that do get the jobs right away are the ones that go above and beyond, right? The ones that
Yeah,
go through
true.
a program and just start applying on LinkedIn, it's hard for them to compete versus the ones that go to networking events, that have a strong personal portfolio, have done CTFs, right? It's the bar has been raised. You no longer can just come from school and expect a job in cybersecurity. You almost never could, because some people also think that it's a intermediate senior level role. But now the bar has been raised. So that's kind of my perception on the gap. The gap is really more in the mid to senior level, I think, because everybody wants to hire a security analyst that can manage their entire security program. Right.
Yeah, you don't want to put your security operations center in the hands of a novice. No one's going to do that. So, and I completely agree with you that sometimes it's a matter of managing different expectations. And like you said, education is one of the challenges that's there, because there isn't enough people with the right education, and not just the academic classroom education, but also the hands-on education you get in the role. But aside from education, what are some other present challenges you would see in terms of growing that growing need for cybersecurity talent, particularly in Canada? Let's focus on Canada since we're here after all.
Sure. I think for the talent, like, talent as in students going, like, getting their first opportunities, or are you saying kind of getting organizations to get students into the program, into
A
their,
bit of
sorry, into
both.
their organizations?
A bit of
Um,
both should be fine. Yeah.
yeah, I think one of the things that, you know, one of the issues is that there's not enough mentorship. What you'll notice is the organizations that have good mentorship within the organizations, they have great security teams, but not only great security teams, but great security alumni, right? People will go to an organization, get their skills, and move and go to another organization, build up a similar program there. Because with cybersecurity, it's having somebody to kind of guide you and tell you what's actually needed, what does the business care about, is very important. And mentorship aspect is, I think, in that one of the things that can help um, get students more opportunities. But also, once you have gone through this program and somebody has mentored you, there's a good chance that once you get to a certain level, you'll mentor students yourself. And it comes and becomes kind of the snowball, right? And that's really where we want to get to. But unfortunately, many people that are in IT are not necessarily looking to be mentors. A lot of IT people are technical, introverted, like to kind of, sit at their computer, get their work done, and be done for the day. When it comes to mentorship, it's a very different type of skill set, and we don't see as much of that in this field. So what I would say is uh, invest in leadership in your security team, in your organization, and go look at co-op programs, because All you need is one leader, one security leader, whether that's your engineer, your architect, whatever you want to be. It doesn't even have to be a manager, right? A leader, even a security PM. And go look at the government Canadian programs, because you can get much of your students' wage reimbursed by the government.
Yeah.
And just by investing in a little bit of leadership, and basically getting these federal government grants, you can grow your security team quite easily, um, and have someone ready to take that role in case your leader, what we've also seen is there's a big turnaround every 3 to 5 years. People are leaving jobs. What happens if your security leader leaves, right? You need to have somebody ready, otherwise you're going to be paying your arm and leg for somebody that's at that level, or somebody that's a higher level, so they can be onboarded quickly. So you also have to think about who's your succession, right? So um, investing in mentorship and co-op students, I think, is one of the ways that, as a country, we can help bolster our security economy.
I completely agree with that as well. And just a bit of a digression. I'm also one of those people who have a different background. So my original degree is actually in chemistry, and I've got a second degree in pharmaceutical chemistry. But I've worked in IT for the last 12, 13 years. So I know what it's like. And I find most times it's people who have that sort of experience, who have, they've seen the other side of things. So when they come in here, they know what it's like, and they're willing to actually, mentor people, get them back up to that speed. So that's the way it usually is. Not to knock the nerds. The perception after is that all IT folks are geeks or nerds, so which isn't always true. I want to say, but sometimes yes, that's what it is. So one of the things we want to do is change that. But just to divert from that a little bit, if you think about those gaps, for example, you've mentioned mentorship, you've mentioned those skills. Now let's leave the enterprises for a minute. How do you think that the academia can play a role in addressing those gaps, mentorship? Because one of the things people have complained about is not many programs have those skills hands already. So they teach you all the theory, but not the practical part of it. So how can the academia help to narrow those gaps that exist?
Yeah, so the classic catch 22 with this is that, how do you gain security skills, but people don't want to trust an entry level person to do security, because that can lead to a lot of other problems, right? And so I think, you know, schools, what they need to do is, I think, case studies and practical assignments are the most important thing you can do, right? Yes, theory is great, but I'm a big fan of labs, so that when something actually, if you do get the opportunity to do this in your organization, you'll already have done this once before, and you'll just implement on that, move up on that process. Now, the other thing is, um, organizations need to have need this is why the leadership piece is important. There's a lot of value that an entry level cybersecurity person can do with read only access, right? Like, that's there. You don't need to give them admin access. You can get them started on security awareness training, get them to write phishing campaigns, right? Get them to do the first version of policies, where all they have to do is interview the technical leads and go, put those policies in place to make sure, these things aren't, it's not rocket science. There's a lot of way, like, you don't need to ask them to strategize your next 3 years. You can get them to do some very low level things. And that's why mentorship and leadership is important, because once you've gone through it, you know what needs to be done. And once you've been mentored through it, you can take that program and put it back to your students or your own mentees, right? There's a lot of entry, like, security awareness is one of them. They can create infographics and PSAs for the company. They can, monitor some alerting that you have. Um, create policies. Different. There's lots, and that's already a good amount of workload that will be off of leadership's plate, right? So um, that's what I think. Yeah, I hope those two answers kind of answer your question there.
Yeah, it does help. I that I remember a long time ago. I remember then this is one of my earlier in my career. I was speaking to someone and it was like, well, when you new people come in, all you do, all you are is you're a monkey, you're a wrench monkeys, because that's all you do. You do all the low level stuff, which he wasn't being, he wasn't denigrating or being, you know, trying to look down. But I understand that, because how else are you going to get the experience if you don't get
Yeah,
your hands dirty by doing all of those things? So it's very important,
ex-
and I think that's the way to
exactly.
learn.
It's
You've
like
got to
math, right? You gotta
exactly,
know how to do the math before you start using the calculator, right?
exactly, yes. Otherwise, you don't learn. You don't know the principle behind it, which is what it is.
Exactly.
So
What one last thing I wanted to add there. The other thing is post secondary is what they can do is they can help. A lot of times, I think what they need is to help students push them to do more CTFs, have
yes,
programs with
yes,
communities that are integrated, because a lot of times these are student led programs. And what happens when this enthusiastic set of student leaves? Maybe the next set of students isn't as enthusiastic, and that program kind of falls apart. So it needs to be, I think, a little bit more post-secondary involvement from their leadership as well. Okay, sorry,
which is
back to you.
true. Which is fine. That's true. And I think, I, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this started when you were president of ISACA with the post-secondary outreach to actually get post-secondary a bit more involved in cybersecurity and all of that. So, in case you didn't know, that's Anthony's idea. Thank you very much for doing that. I'm involved in that. We've got UFV, BCIT, SFU, UBC all involved, and almost every event we've got a CDF where people are, getting their hands dirty. So it really helps. And speaking of the students, now I know that a large number of Canadian higher institutions have a lot of international students as in their student population. We know it's one of the things that the schools do in particular for so many reasons. We're not discussing that here. But, how do you think these international students can actually contribute also to that talent shortage? Because there's a lot of them in IT programs.
Yeah. So I actually, I'm a really big fan of international students, and I think that's one of the ways that we're going to keep ourselves, because I don't think we're getting enough local students. International
Yes.
students is how we're going to be able to continue growing a lot of these positions. Now, the issue that I find with international students is there varies from international students that are coming here to bring their family over and that are head first. They really want to get everything going. And then the ones that are here just to, because, maybe they're wealthy back in their country and their family sent them to go get some education. And what I find right now is those that really put their head down, that go to events, that listen to advice, many of the ones do get opportunities and are able to get jobs. But it's the ones that expect jobs to come to them are the ones that not only don't get jobs, but they also sometimes make their post secondary institution look bad,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's why, as an international student, actually not even just international, local students have the same issue, right? When I was at BCIT, I think 60 or 70% of my class was international. I was competing for the same jobs with them. Now, the other thing that the thing that internationals get a disadvantage is that for them, a lot of times it's an uphill battle of learning our culture. Um,
Yes.
and that sometimes, luckily, I would say Vancouver is one of the better places because most of most of our population is either immigrants, first gen
Diverse.
immigrants, or even second gen. My parents were
Yeah.
immigrants, right? So luckily, Vancouver isn't a place that's going to necessarily um, it's not going to hurt you as much as it would in other places, but it
Yeah.
is still an uphill battle. And a lot of the international students I've met, because they're not comfortable with the language, they come off as very shy and introverted. And as a teacher, once I get through the layers, I find out how great these students are. Maybe they've had even years of experience already, and they're just a fantastic hire, but because on the outside they're shy and hard to get across, it's really hard for people to even notice that, right? So
Yeah.
I think for
True.
international students, it's for them, they need to work well. Actually, I think right now anybody, not even local students, they need to, because there's kind of a flood of students coming into tech, you need to stand out. And
Yeah.
if you're an
True.
international student, you need to go to networking events, so people know your name. So when you're graduating, you already have 2 or 3 people that are waiting for you to graduate to give you an interview, right? If you're a local
Yeah.
student, same thing. And if you're an international student, maybe you just need to practice a little bit more being comfortable. And
Yes.
especially in tech, like we said, a lot of introverts. That's why it hurts twice as much for international students that aren't
Yeah.
comfortable and are introverts. These days, if you even just apply online 10 times, you're lucky if once you get a reply back.
Okay.
Not an
Yeah.
interview, just a reply, right? So
True. True.
all of my best opportunities I've received were from networking, from being at the right
Yeah.
place at the right time. I've know students that got a job at an ISACA event because they ran into a hiring manager at the right place at the right time, kind of thing, right?
There you go.
It's yeah. And so the question for international students, what I like to always say is look at the students around you. Pretend you're all going for the exact same job. Now, obviously, you're not. There's different specializations and fields. What's going to make the managers say that you stand out more than the person
Next
beside you?
person.
And if you can't
Absolutely.
answer that, then you're going to have a much more difficult time.
Yeah. I completely and totally agree with that. And I, I, I understand how it is. I wasn't an international student when I was in school here. I was actually domestic, but I had lots of international students as friends. So I know the struggle that they're facing. And also having been an immigrant myself, I understand that. And it's sometimes challenging, for them. And
Hmm.
I also found out, well, I find that many of those students, because it's not just in the past, it's still the same today, many of those international students happen to be very, sometimes well trained already from their home countries. And, they're
Yeah.
coming here to get that additional education just to round it out for them, which I find funny because I say to people, you're working on a SQL server in Nigeria isn't different from the SQL server in Canada or in Bangladesh. SQL is the same anywhere. There's no difference.
Yeah.
So it's just the cultural tones that make it slightly different. How do things work in Canada? How do they work in Nigeria? And culturally, they could be different.
And I will say there's a few organizations that I know of personally that know this very well and have taken advantage of it completely because they go to international students first to see which ones of them already have years of experience, and then they basically grab them while they're still at school and finishing up school. But again, that's only few organizations that go and look out. As an international student, make yourself visible, which means maybe have
Yeah,
that full decked out LinkedIn for every single keyword, right? When you go
yeah,
introduce yourself, you don't introduce yourself as a student. Yes, you're a student, but you introduce yourself as a working professional that with years of experience that happens to be doing upgraded, education in Canada, right? It's the
exactly.
mindset that you put yourself against, right? You're not entry level just because you come to Canada, especially in tech. You're entry level if you act like you're entry level.
Exactly. Fake it till you make it, perhaps, if you will.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Now, speaking on that, because like I said, they have experiences. How do you think, if companies are able to actually bring these international students into their enterprises to work with them, how do you think the diverse backgrounds and experiences of these students can actually positively impact our cybersecurity landscape as a whole? Because they have, like I said, they've got experiences. How can they help?
Yeah, so I can look at this from 2 points of view.
Okay.
One of them is from the professional background. The interest, like the thing is, there's lots of professional backgrounds that are parallel that you can meld into cybersecurity quite well. For example, before cybersecurity, I was in digital marketing. How does that relate to cybersecurity? Well, guess what? Security awareness is pretty much just digital marketing. And understanding how to do a sales funnel helps me build the culture of my security awareness program, turning into a security culture much better, which then leads to nobody complaining about phishing. Maybe it can lead to bigger budget from executives, stuff like that. It all comes together, right? From a business background, there's a lot of security auditing, privacy, there's a lot of parallel industries that have parallel skills. So the more diverse you have, the more different mindset you can put on. If you ask a bunch of technical people how to do security awareness, none of them will ever tell you, hey, let's set up a sales funnel with a top of the funnel, medium of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel kind of thing for
Yeah,
our,
true.
right? If you don't talk to an educator, you're not going to say we need, auditory learning, visual learning, kinetic learning, all the different types of learning, right? These different jobs have different things that you just need to be, really all you need to be is creative enough to see your parallels, right?
Yeah,
Almost every
true.
industry has some kind of way. Even, for example, let's say chefs in a kitchen, in a busy kitchen, being able to work under such pressure would be amazing for instant response, because instant response is basically working under pressure all the different time. There's tons of parallel skills. Now let's talk about the cultural aspect of a diverse background. You know, there's, as we all know, there's lots of different cultures. Canada is a cultural melting pot, and different cultures, come with different personalities. And the more, a lot of people's backgrounds are different. A lot of them are based on different cultures. And I think the more diverse you have in your organization, which means the more different viewpoints you get, right? So different, I'm sure that doing, like, for example, if you have somebody that did security, let's say India versus China, right? This is where we get lots of international students. I
Hmm.
bet that it's looked at somebody that's had previous experience. It's different in one country than the other. Probably very different in Russia than it is in Ukraine or the U.S. Right? And putting all of those kind of hats together, being able to have as much perspective as possible, I think gives you the best results, because you're removing different types of biases, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think that those having a diverse kind of professional and cultural background in the end kind of come together and allow you to reduce as many biases as possible, because these, a lot of people will look at risk a very different way. And in
true.
cybersecurity, it's one of the most subjective fields there are, because if you ask 40, there's actually a saying I love to say: if you ask if you ask 20 CPAs, right, or CFOs, 20 CFOs how to do financials, they'll all give you the same answer. If you ask 20 different CISOs how to do security, they'll give you 30 different
20.
answers.
True. Yes, I completely and totally agree. And that's just the way security is, right? It's just the way it is. Now, because you've touched on a couple of interesting things about how, culturally it's sometimes difficult for international students or new immigrants entering the workforce. Are there any, now this is speaking to your academic background, your academic position. Are there any initiatives or programs that you think universities can implement or are already implementing to sort of support these immigrants and these international students in, seamlessly getting into the industry, and starting those careers and being successful? Because yes, it's like you said, it's one thing to be here, it's one thing to get in there, and it's different. So any initiatives, any programs that high institutions can do or implement to help that transition be smoother for these international students?
Sure. I mean, one of the things, and this is speaking to international students in the past, one of the things that they found very effective is when post secondaries have their own kind of events for international students. Because it's not, if you're an international student and you don't know how Vancouver culture is, how the culture here is like at all, how are you going to go find a networking event, right? You don't know. And so having the university take the first steps in setting up those events, and also providing knowledge to students how to find events in their own industries, I think is very important. Because one thing that I hear constantly is that a lot of international students come here, and the ones that come by themselves feel very lonely. And if you're
True.
lonely, everything becomes so much more difficult, right? Having that support group of friends. And I've seen a lot of, the cool thing is that they bring all the international students together, and so you'll have students from absolutely different countries that sometimes have broken English all becoming best friends and growing together. And then you go in 5 years, you see them all like kind of like now, you know com- Canadian citizens still hanging out, you you see that the connection they made at the beginning really helped them get through. Especially the first year or two is usually the hardest. especially if you're
True.
going to school. It's expensive here, right? Unless you have a whole
Very.
bunch of money to live off of, you're probably working. There's students that are working, 20 to 40 hours a week while doing school 20 to 40 hours a week. And it gets a lot. So, well, the best thing I think this as students, what you can do is you can make the effort to go to networking events. I know you'll be tired, you might have stuff to do, but I think it's something that needs to be, you need to push yourself to do. And universities need to continue organizing these events, as well as like providing, not only providing students, but students taking the opportunities to learn about other similar type of events or networking groups. For example, if you're in cybersecurity in Vancouver, if you're on the compliance, governance, risk side, we have ISACA events. If you're a penetration tester, we have OWASP events, OWASP. And both of these organizations try to run monthly events. So whether you're on one side or the other, you can go find some peers and make some friends. But you wouldn't have known that unless you know somebody that probably told you about it, or you knew where to Google and where to look, right? For example,
Yeah.
ISAC is on Eventbrite, OWASP is on Meetup, right? It's not like everybody talks together and says we're using this one platform for all of Vancouver. Everyone's doing
Yeah.
their own thing. There's probably another cybersecurity organization that I don't even know about that's pretty big and meets up. I don't know, right? But it's getting yourself out there, getting yourself involved in the community. I think is something that helps, especially on the mental level, and the networking definitely doesn't hurt.
It does not. I agree. And one of the things, like when I first moved here as well several years ago, I one of one of the attractions to Vancouver was just the diversity in Vancouver. It's amazing, and it's got a fantastic food scene. So if you want to enjoy international food, come to Vancouver.
Oh yeah.
But also, in a way, because there's a lot of international students here from sometimes now this is the security side of things. There's a lot going on in the news about different countries, and this is some companies wouldn't even allow you to work remotely from certain parts of the world just because of certain things. And we've got a lot of international students sometimes from these parts of the world. So how do those, and with the evolving, the deepening of privacy laws and regulations and how all of that ties into security, as well as this huge influx of cybersecurity professionals from international destinations such as these, how do you think these evolving privacy laws and regulations, as well as that international student talent coming into Canada, can all sort of contribute to that industry, strengthening it or taking out whatever weaknesses we might perceive due to those regulations?
Yeah, I personally, I'm not aware of, I haven't done my research into this, so it's hard for me to speak on. I know there are some, I'm just not too aware of them. And I don't know, I know for private companies, most of the time it should be okay unless you're working directly with a government company or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. But I would assume that after you are a full citizen, those guide or those restrictions would be removed. I'm now again, I'm not 100% sure. And Vancouver, luckily, well, Western Canada, well, I guess luckily in this case, but unluckily in other cases, we don't have a big federal government branch here.
Yeah,
So there's a lot more private companies here than you would, well, there's a lot more companies in general in Toronto, but the mix, we have a lot less kind of government regulated here than like percentage wise. So it
yeah,
wouldn't be as much of an issue as say like let's say Ottawa rather than Toronto, right?
true,
Ottawa
true.
is where you'd come up to that issue a lot more than Vancouver,
Yeah,
and it was
and everyone needs a
probably for
security
just,
clearance.
yeah, that's what it is. It's probably just issues with security clearance, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, I haven't had much experience in that, so I think that there. I just hope there's enough opportunities without that as well.
Right. I believe there is. I believe there is because I know quite a few private companies, some really big ones. I don't want to mention any names because I'm not being sponsored. If anyone wants to sponsor us, talk to me. But there's some programs that they actually do, particularly with getting in new talent from schools and all of that. I personally I got my current role through networking, and it was even before I was done with school. So I exactly know what that is like, and that's what you've said. Um, so just sort of to sort of bring this all sort of to a close, let's just sort of looking ahead. How can we take the combined efforts of local talent, international contributors, so domestic students, international students, companies, academic institutions? How can we take all of that together? What would be your advice or your recommendation to bring that together to sort of secure kind of cybersecurity ecosystem? Because I was speaking with someone this afternoon, and we're actually contrasting how in Europe there's a huge push by the EU government for privacy regulations, data privacy regulation. It's big. Conversely, in the United States, there isn't any federal regulation really around that. You've got the California one, but that's about it. There's no real federal one. So that's two different outlooks from two different parts of the world. So I know we're not quite like the US, but we're not at the level of the GDPR. So how can all of this sort of come together to help us be better with cybersecurity and privacy and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think even Canada, we've started. There's some security laws that we have started implementing, so we're on the right track. We are a
Yeah,
little bit behind, I would say,
we are.
um, but it's also because of the size of our country. We're not too many people either, so it's a really hard balance.
Yeah,
I think really what it comes down to is some education, because a lot of companies don't need to take the data that they're taking. If people just had a data kind of mindset of the more data I have, the more liable I am, right? They would take a lot less data. People used to say data is the new oil. Now is data is the new fire. The more data you have, the more chance you can get
blow up.
fined. The more of a target you are, yeah, the more burned you get, right? So
Yeah,
I think uh, that's something that we need to keep in mind for sure for privacy. And the thing is, the reason why I don't see it as too much of an issue here in Canada is because most Canadian companies that are looking to become big companies, they will get GDPR certified and ISO certified because they're going to be looking outside of
yeah,
Canada. And so, unfortunately, it's not Canada driving that regulation, but a
yeah.
lot of Canadian companies will get it anyway. But really, I think the way that we're gonna, in my opinion, is the big thing that we as cybersecurity leaders can do in Canada to help drive cybersecurity growth is become mentors, right? Go to your organization, figure out how you can get a cybersecurity analyst funded for the first year by government grants, right? And become a mentor, become that mentor to get people's doors in foot in the door, and rotate every year, rotate every 2 years. I don't know, put it as a contract, 2 year contract, 1 year contract position, so you can get somebody's foot in the door and keep going. But really, I think there we have enough cybersecurity leaders, and it's not that expensive to bring on these juniors. It's just a matter of the cybersecurity leaders taking the initiative of mentorship
Yeah,
and
that's
convincing the organization to bring them on. And if you know all the managers did that, or even half the managers, we'd be able to hire a lot more people, and we'd put a lot more experience in people, in in these entry level candidates. And the last thing is, it never hurts if the government wants more cybersecurity people. They can give a fund. They can open up a fund for just cybersecurity junior employees. Yeah, they have co-ops, but if you want to push cybersecurity, you can create one specifically for cybersecurity, and you can just get a lot of these entry level positions jobs.
yeah, that's absolutely true. And the grants are, like you said, the grants are there. So it's like leaving money on the table if you don't use them. So we've talked
Exactly.
about a lot, and I've really had fun having this conversation with you. So um, what I wanted to ask now is, so a lot of our audience is new immigrants or new to cybersecurity, looking to get their feet wet, looking to start their career. What if any of them was standing in front of you right now and saying, "Hey, Anthony, I need you to give me two pieces of advice that would make me or help me become successful as I'm launching my cybersecurity career, what would those two pieces of advices, what would they be?
I'll give you three,
Okay, that's
because they go
better.
together. They go together. Usually, there's in from what I see, there's three ways that people get their first job in cybersecurity. One is either formal education, so go to a private college, UBC, a VCC, SFU, whatever. Two is get certifications, so get your ISACA, CISA, CSIM, ISC squared, CISSP, your OSCP, CompTIA, CEH, right? If you don't know what these acronyms are, Google them. But they're industry certifications.
Yeah.
And then three is networking, right? You can get a job doing one of the three. So you can come here and just get a diploma. However, the more you do, the more easier it will be to get a job. Again, if I'm a student, I come in, I finish my program, I have my program. The guy beside me, he's been going to networking events for the entire year, so a bunch of people already know him, and he's gotten the industry certification. He's probably going
It's
to get
better.
hired before me, right? So
Absolutely.
those are the three key things we see. And the more of them you do, the higher your chances. If you're starting to look for jobs as soon as you graduate, it's too late. You should start looking a year before. You should start building
Yeah.
that network, because that network takes a little while to build. And so if you start building it a year before, maybe 8 months in is when you get your first opportunity. Somebody says, hey, we're looking for a job. But guess what? You're graduating in 3 months. So you already have a job before you even graduate, right? So
Exactly.
it will never be instant. It's always about building relationship, and these relationships take a little while to come to give you something. And the last thing I'll say is don't go into. I guess that would have been my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice here, then I'll just leave it at two, is don't go into conversations looking for something. Look for what you can give. Don't go in and
Yeah.
say take. Don't go in with your resume and say I want the job. Go in as a conversation. Give some kind of advice, or have a great conversation. Maybe it's not the first time you meet someone that you ask them for a job. Maybe you meet them two or three times before you're comfortable enough doing that, right? So um, don't think about what you can give versus what you can take, and that's how you should go into these new relationships for networking.
Yeah, thank you. So what I took out of that is three things: educate, certify, network. Those are the three things. So if you're trying to get into the industry, those are your three buzzwords that you need: educate, certify, network. And once you have all of those in place, then you can start to see success at the end of the tunnel, but you still have to do the work. But anyway, it's been a
Exactly.
very interesting conversation today. Thank you so much, Anthony. It was nice having this conversation. I didn't notice the time go by, so it's been very good. I'm going to put a link down to Anthony's LinkedIn profile in the comments. So in the description for this video. So if you want to connect, you can connect with Anthony on LinkedIn. I'm also going to put a link to the ISACA website as well, ISACA Vancouver chapter website. So if you want to find out all about the networking events that we do and the mentorship program, there's also information there as well. If there's anything you want and you don't see that in the description, leave a comment down below and or answer one of the poll questions if you're on Spotify, or put it in the Q&A if you're on Spotify and listening to this podcast, and we would definitely get back to you on that. But on behalf of the audience today, I want to say thank you to Anthony for joining us today. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I'm sure the audience knows a little bit better now how to actually succeed in that career at cybersecurity. So thank you very much, Anthony. And to the audience, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you consider giving it a like, if you're on YouTube, consider subscribing. If you're on Spotify or any of the podcast platforms, consider following the show so that you don't miss new episodes when they're released. And until next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you again.